Good afternoon, everybody. Been having a great time today. Wanted to start off by talking about something obvious, and Zach, I'm not going to blame this on you, but I was a little disappointed when I got here today to realize that Tech Cocktail is not a literal cocktail party. I keep waiting for them to call the bar open. So speaking of the obvious, you guys have heard a lot of great innovative ideas, a lot of great startups with a lot of new, interesting ideas on how to change things. I'm going to talk to you about the most obvious thing you're going to hear today. That is simply putting an ID on any device. Taking your driver's license and putting it on a device. Now, driver's license is our point of entry. Our point of entry as a driver's license then simply becomes a segue into multiple pieces of identification. The idea of this, of your state ID, really came about in a story. My partner, Kevin Brown, came to me a couple of months ago via a business partner of mine as an introduction. Kevin said, I've got an idea. I want to put a driver's license on a phone. And I've been in technology for 25 years. I've sold a lot of companies, built a lot of startups. This is my entire life. I am an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. And my first response was, well, you and everybody else, right? There's 300 companies in the world that want to get into this space. Digital wallet's one of the hottest spaces in the marketplace. Now, my second response was, I believe it's a solvable problem. The technology is actually not very complex. There's some key areas to focus on, but the technology is pretty straightforward. However, what really intrigued me, and the challenge question I said to Kevin was, I said, who do you know? Because this isn't about technology. This is about politics. This is about privacy. This is about protecting your information. Your state ID is built on a very simple premise. 3 components. When we recognize those 3 components, the first thing I did was I called my best friend in the whole world, Scott Allen, and I said, Scott, I need you to come join this company. And the reason I need you to come join this company is Scott has been one of the lead developers at Sprint for the last 12 years. He's developed Sprint mobile applications in about every possible avenue you can think of, including Sprint television, Sprint mobile payments. And I said, Scott, I need this to be convenient. Scott is a UEX, a user experience expert. Convenient in a sense that how do we make sure that this application does not spawn abandonment? Let's make it convenient. Scott took ownership over that. Next thing I said is this needs to be collective, and by collective, it needs to be a partnership. Your state ID is a white label provider to the states. We have no interest in standing on stages like this and telling the whole world that we're the next great thing. We're very interested in standing behind states and helping them realize what is the inevitable conclusion of the digital evolution. The last thing is citizenship. So I spent a lot of time on stages like this with crowds in a different state of mind during my 20s. Played in punk rock bands. Grew up in the protest movement. You can tell by my selection of graphics over here that I'm an old school punk rock kid. Citizenship is something that's very important to me. When I first put my hands on a keyboard as a technologist, the first time I encountered technology in a real way that meant something to me, I did not think about making millions of dollars. I thought about making a difference. That's what your state ID is to me. This is a chance to make a difference, for us to define what privacy is and what digital citizenship should become, not what it is today, not the policies that were force-fed from major technology vendors, no offense to anyone in the room, but take some responsibility and some ownership over this. Big data is exciting. Don't sell my information. When we sat down with the state, first place we went, through Kevin's introductions, was Pat George, who was the Secretary of Commerce for the state of Kansas. Pat heard this idea. He said, I'm going to send you over to the Secretary of Revenue. Secretary of Revenue said, we're going to bring in the CIO. We're going to bring in the head of the DMV. State of Kansas, we'll be launching our beta test for the first digital identification in January in the state of Kansas. We have 17 other states that we're already in conversations with. We built this company in July, and we expect this company to be putting digital identifications on devices in reality by the end of next year. Now, I want to caution you, don't throw away your paper ID quite yet. There's probably going to be a 3 to 5 year adoption process for this to happen. You guys are going to have a lot of questions for me, a lot of hard questions. I'm ready to answer those. But the question I'm really focused on is for everyone in this room. How interesting is this to you? If this is something that you want to become involved with, we have a petition on our website. So as I said, we have 17 states that we're pre-paving our way into. We're building those states based on a revenue model, which my partner Kevin will have a chance to talk about if you have questions about that. However, what I'm really, really intrigued in is understanding, does this mean something to you? And I say that because this is an open dialogue. I may have some ideas, but I don't necessarily have all the answers. Your state ID, please visit our presentation, our petition.
I'm just curious because generally revolution and government procurement don't go hand in hand. And I spent a little bit of time in both, I guess. How do you manage that, right? So you have your stance, your brand is very much about like sort of strength and identity, but having spent some time selling to governments, that's a yearly or multi-yearly cycle, and they're not necessarily into this kind of thing, or at least that kind of stance. Has that been your experience? Are you managing that in some way?
So the key to this, and this is all credit due to Kevin Brown, Kevin's experience comes from the finance world. Kevin was a banker for a long time. He's built a lot of different companies. And Kevin's, the key to the adoption for this is when we go to a state, we're not asking the state to write us a check. It's actually the inverse. We're paying states to use our technology. We're paying them a lot. As a matter of fact, the state of Kansas will make more in the first year off of the adoption of your state ID than they do off the lottery. So the incentive then becomes very easy because states universally are revenue-based. So the adoption, part of the hurdle to adoption is yet this is just another piece of technology, then goes back to that revenue model. You have another question?
Well, I want to understand how that revenue model works. Yeah.
Mr. Brown, would you like to comment on that?
Well, I appreciate that question. The revenue model is built off of the citizens of the state wanting the digital ID, so they renew their driver's license, and at the renewal point, they choose to have their digital ID as well as their paper ID at the beginning, and eventually only having the digital ID. And we found from our interactions with the state that that's where they know it's going, and that's where they want it to go.
Does that answer your question?
So you're saying the government thinks they can make more money by paying you to incorporate this so the users pay them more?
Okay,
He
so
says yes, you say no.
No, maybe I misunderstood your question. The government makes more money because they eliminate the expense of going through the process of generating a paper ID, as well as the advantages that the states will see with legislation that's being driven from the federal level. I don't want to get mired down in the details of what's coming together that's helping propel us through state agencies at a phenomenal rate. We started this July 31st, and we already have traction within our first state that's phenomenal. We thought it would take longer, I guess is what I'm saying.
add on that a little bit. The state is not paying us for the privilege. The state's a business partner with us. So we're doing basically a JV agreement with every single state that we go into. That JV agreement then helps them define, because every state has different levels of nexus. For example, the state of Arizona, I think you renew your ID every 45 years or something ridiculous like that. Kansas, it's every 6. So we have to work through all that.
Okay, so what's the specific? Who pays who and how much?
Okay, so again, there's always a renewal fee for your driver's license, a registration fee. That is the first point of entry. However, if you expand into that, so for example, hunting and fishing licenses, we come from a game state. That's every single year. You have to get a new fishing license. You have to get a new hunting license. So there's multiple levels of operation.
So you pay them first and hope that then
No,
you get the money from signing up. I'm getting confused, or I'm an idiot.
Here, let me make it simple. When I go to the DMV, I'm currently paying to get a paper ID. Under our business model, I'll pay for the paper ID, and as a portion of that fee, I'll also get a digital ID, and we'll phase the paper IDs out. The reason that it makes sense for the state to be our joint venture partner in this is because they recognize that their revenue for generating the paper ID is phased out. They're currently using vendors for that, and we're cheaper and more efficient, I guess is what I'm going to. Who's paying for it are the citizens, but that's who's currently paying for it.
But to start off, you said you're paying the state.
No, the states aren't. Every state has an implementation fee.
Okay, so that was why we're confused. You actually said we're paying the state of Kansas to do this program.
Sorry, I may have misspoke. No, it's not. We're not paying them. We're paying them back. They're a JV partner.
They're a percentage partner in the revenue that's generated from your state ID.
It's a revenue shared deal, period.
Yes. Joint venture. Yeah.
That's a simple answer. Okay, great.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You had the definition of privacy up there, and I'm just trying to figure out mentally how people are going to think that digitizing or having a digital ID is going to make it more private and not less private.
So one of the first things we did is we wrote a patent, and that patent specifically focuses on that single question. I was lucky enough, I helped build an e-commerce company and worked on the conversion from the CISSP standard to the PCI standard, and that conversation was part of that. We should talk about the triple DES encryption and that kind of microburst kind of an idea. So taking those same old school principles of information distribution and putting that into a, in the patent sense, we're putting it into a anonymized, so it's self-selected information. So for example, when you enroll in your ID, you're going to have 3 factors of identification, or 3 factors of authorization. Each one of those are self-selected. So it goes back to the old hacker mentality. If you build the machine, they know the machine. The best thing we can do to protect privacy is to make the machine so incredibly complex that it's not worth it to try to attack from that angle.
What are the 3 levels of authorization? 3 levels of
Thank you, Oliver.
We'll ask you at the bar.
Yeah, we'll see you at the bar.
Thank you. Good? Is that it?